Hello. Tonight, I will take you back many, many years to the final times of ancient Egypt. Lie down comfortably and let me carry you to the most mysterious and curious corners of history's pages. In the Alexandria harbor, the sun is descending. Golden-colored lights are dancing on the azure-blue waters of the Mediterranean. In the distance, a magnificent palace made of white marble rises toward the sky. This palace is the home of one of history's most powerful, most intelligent, most mysterious women, Cleopatra. Have you heard her name? Of course you have. But do you really know her? Tonight, I will share her story with you from beginning to end. But not just the simple story you know, the details that remained hidden, the secrets in dark corners, and most importantly, the true face of that famous death. Are you ready? Then let's begin. Slowly, without rushing. Cleopatra was born in 69 BC, but her birth was not an ordinary birth. She was a child of the Ptolemaic dynasty. Do you know this dynasty? It was a dynasty founded by Ptolemy, one of Alexander's generals. They were actually of Greek origin, but they ruled Egypt for centuries. When Cleopatra was born, Egypt was already very far from its former glorious days. The Roman Empire was rising. It was becoming an indestructible power. And Egypt, in the shadow of this power, was nothing more than an ally, sometimes prey. Little Cleopatra grew up in the corridors of the palace, but she was not an ordinary princess. No, she was very different. Her father, Ptolemy XII, was a weak king. The people did not love him. Revolts were constantly breaking out. And the little girl was watching all of this, learning. What was power? How was it obtained? How was it preserved? These questions began to take shape in her mind at a very early age. Cleopatra had a special talent. Languages, yes, languages. The historian Plutarch tells us Cleopatra spoke 9 languages. 9 languages, can you imagine? Greek, Latin, Aramaic, Egyptian, Arabic, Hebrew. Among the Ptolemies who ruled Egypt, she was the first ruler to speak Egyptian. Now this was very important. She could speak with her people in their own language. This gave her a great advantage. But beyond languages, she loved philosophy, mathematics, astronomy. She would spend hours in Alexandria's famous library, never leaving. She would get lost among those books. Knowledge was power to her, and she thirsted for power. When her father Ptolemy died, Cleopatra was only 18 years old. The throne was left to her and her younger brother Ptolemy XIII. According to ancient Egyptian tradition, the two had to marry. Yes, siblings had to marry. This may seem strange to you, but in those times in Egypt, this was normal. To keep the royal blood pure. But this marriage was not happy. No. The young brother was actually nothing more than a puppet. Behind him were powerful advisors, especially a eunuch named Pothinus and a general named Achilles. These men did not like Cleopatra. They did not want a strong, independent woman on the throne. And before long, they deposed Cleopatra. They expelled her from the palace. But Cleopatra was not one to give up. No, she fled to Syria and gathered an army there. She would return. She would take back her throne. But how? It was precisely at this moment that an event occurred that would change the course of history. It was 48 BC. A civil war was taking place in Rome. Julius Caesar and Pompey Magnus were fighting each other. Two giants, two generals. For Rome's future, Caesar won at the Battle of Pharsalus. Pompey fled. Where to? To Egypt. Because he had once helped young Ptolemy's father, he thought he could take refuge, but he was wrong. Ptolemy's advisors killed Pompey As he disembarked from his ship, they cut off his head and saved this bloody gift to present to Caesar. Pompey's head, a gift. How terrible, isn't it? Caesar arrived in Alexandria a few days later. He was looking for Pompey, and the advisors presented his severed head to Caesar. Imagine, Pompey was once a friend of Caesar's. Yes, they had fought, but when he saw his head, Caesar wept. Historians write this. He wept, and he became angry with Ptolemy's advisors. What kind of barbarism was this? This was also a diplomatic mistake. A big mistake. Cleopatra saw this opportunity. Caesar was in Alexandria, Rome's most powerful man. If she could win him, if she could persuade him, she could reclaim her throne. But how? The palace was under siege. Her brother's soldiers were everywhere. How would she reach Caesar? And here, the famous legend begins. Cleopatra had herself wrapped in a carpet. Yes, in a carpet. Or according to some sources, in a bed sheet. And a servant, a loyal man named Apollodorus, took this rolled carpet on his back and brought it to Caesar's room in the palace. A gift for Julius Caesar, he said. And when the carpet was opened, out came Cleopatra. Young, beautiful, intelligent Cleopatra. Caesar was shocked, but he was also impressed. What courage, what intelligence this was. This woman had risked her life just to be able to speak with him. What did they talk about that night? No one knows exactly. But by morning, Caesar's decision was clear. He would support Cleopatra. The Alexandrian War began. Caesar's soldiers fought against Ptolemy's army. The city burned ablaze. Part of the famous library of Alexandria was destroyed in this war. Thousands of books, thousands of years of knowledge were lost. But in the end, Caesar won. Young Ptolemy drowned while fleeing to the Nile River. Cleopatra was now queen. And beside her was Rome's most powerful man. The relationship between Caesar and Cleopatra. Was this only a political alliance, or was it true love? Historians still debate this. But we know this. Caesar stayed in Egypt for months. This was very unusual. There were matters in Rome, there were problems, but he was taking boat trips on the Nile River with Cleopatra. They spent time together, conversed, made plans. And before long, Cleopatra became pregnant. She gave birth to a son. They named him Ptolemy Caesar, but everyone called him Caesarion, Little Caesar, Caesar's son, the son of a Roman general and an Egyptian queen. This child was the union of two worlds. Caesar eventually returned to Rome, but he summoned Cleopatra to join him. Cleopatra went to Rome with Caesarion, a queen in Rome. Caesar gave her a villa on the opposite bank of the Tiber River. What did the Romans think? Some felt admiration, some felt disgust. A foreign queen, Caesar's mistress, perhaps influencing Caesar, threatening the Republic. But Caesar didn't care. He even erected a golden statue of Cleopatra in the Forum by Cheek. This was very provocative. The Romans were angry, and the conspiracy began. Brutus, Cassius, and the others, they decided to kill Caesar to save the Republic. Ides of March, the 15th of March, March 15th of the year 44 BC. Caesar went to the Senate, and it was a trap waiting for him. 23 stab wounds. He was stabbed 23 times. His friends, senators, even Brutus. Did he really say "et tu, Brute"? We don't know, but he died. He fell to the ground, leaning against Pompey's statue, and gave up his life covered in blood. Cleopatra was in Rome when this happened. What did she feel, I wonder? Was she afraid? Was she sad? Both probably. Caesar was gone, her protector, her ally, perhaps the man she loved. and now Rome was in chaos. It was dangerous. Cleopatra immediately returned to Egypt. She took Caesarion with her and fled to Alexandria, to her safe lands. But in Rome, events were developing rapidly. Caesar's will was opened. He had declared his grandnephew Octavianus as his heir. He hadn't even mentioned Caesarion. This was bad news for Cleopatra. Octavianus did not love Cleopatra. He saw her as a threat. But Octavianus was not yet powerful. He was a young boy, 18 years old, and there were other players in Rome: Marcus Antonius, Caesar's loyal general, and Lepidus. The three united. They formed the second triumvirate. They divided Rome among themselves. Octavianus took the west, Antonius the east, Lepidus Africa, and Antonius's territories were right next to Egypt. A few years passed. Cleopatra ruled Egypt. She tried to strengthen her country, but her eye was always on Rome, because Egypt's fate was tied to Rome's decisions. And in 41 BC, Antonius sent her a message. He wanted her to come to Tarsus. They would discuss the situation in the eastern provinces. This was actually an order, but Cleopatra acted like a queen. She made Antonius wait for months, and when she finally decided to go, she went with a magnificent display. Imagine a gold-plated ship, purple sails, silver oars, the deck decorated with gold and jewels. Cleopatra, dressed like Venus, was sitting on her throne. Beside her were cupids, waving fans. Beautiful servants were dressed like sea nymphs. And as the ship advanced down the Cydnus River, incense was burning from everywhere. Music was playing. The people of Tarsus ran to the shore to watch this spectacle. Antonius was left alone on his throne. Everyone had gone to watch Cleopatra. Plutarch writes this: a rumor spread. Venus had invited Bacchus to a feast for the good of Asia. Cleopatra invited Antonius to a feast on her own ship. And that night, that magnificent, ostentatious night, Antonius was enchanted like Caesar. Cleopatra's intelligence, her charm, her wealth, all of it impressed Antonius. He too was a powerful man. He was handsome, charismatic. He was a warrior. But in the face of Cleopatra, he fell weak. He fell in love. Or perhaps he was just enchanted. Who knows? But after that night, the two did not part. Antonius went to Egypt. He lived in Alexandria with Cleopatra. Months passed. They were enjoying themselves, organizing feasts, going hunting. They founded a club called the Inimitable Livers. They were famous for their banquets every night. Excess, luxury, pleasure. But this wasn't just entertainment. It was also a political alliance. Cleopatra had once again secured Rome's power on her side, and Antonius had gained access to Egypt's wealth. Cleopatra gave birth to twins, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene, sun and moon. Antonius's children, another alliance, another bond. But in Rome, Octavianus was growing impatient. Antonius was neglecting his duty. While he should have been dealing with matters in the East, he was enjoying himself in Egypt with a queen. And Octavianus turned this into propaganda. He spread rumors like, Antonius has forgotten Rome. He has fallen under the spell of an Egyptian witch. He will give Rome to Cleopatra. He provoked the Romans. He turned them against Antonius. Antonius returned to Rome for a while. He tried to make peace with Octavianus. He even married Octavianus's sister, Octavia. Yes, while he was with Cleopatra. It was a political marriage, but it didn't last long. Antonius returned to Egypt again, to Cleopatra, and this time there was no return. He divorced Octavia, He married Cleopatra, a Roman general marrying a foreign queen. This was unacceptable to Rome. Octavianus had Antonius's will read to the Senate, or claimed to have read it. He said Antonius had left Roman territories to Cleopatra's children. Was this true? We don't know. But the Romans were angered. War was declared on Cleopatra, and Antonius, because he was on her side, became Rome's enemy. 31 BC, the Battle of Actium on the western coast of Greece. A naval battle, Antonius and Cleopatra's fleet against Octavianus's fleet, under the command of Marcus Agrippa. The battle began in the early morning hours. Ships clashed, sounds of oars, shouts, screams. But something was going wrong. Cleopatra's ships suddenly turned, fled from the battle. Why? This is still debated. Perhaps it was a strategic maneuver. Perhaps she was afraid. Perhaps there was an agreement. We don't know. But Cleopatra's 60 ships fled with the wind at their backs. And Antonius, what did he do? He left his own ship and followed Cleopatra. Was it from love? From strategy? No one knows. But this move left his army leaderless. Their morale was broken, and the battle was lost. Octavianus won. It was a decisive victory. Antonius and Cleopatra fled to Egypt. But now everything was over. Most of their armies had dispersed, and their allies had abandoned them. Octavianus marched his army toward Egypt. Alexandria was besieged. Final battles occurred, but all were in vain. There was no hope left. Antonius understood the magnitude of defeat, and one day they told him that Cleopatra had died. It was false news, a misunderstanding, but Antonius believed it, and he plunged his sword into his stomach. Suicide. But he hadn't done it well. He didn't die immediately. While lying in blood, he learned the truth. Cleopatra was alive. He was taken to her tomb, and there, in Cleopatra's arms, he took his last breath. "I died like a Roman," he said, "like an honorable warrior." Cleopatra was completely alone now. Antonius was gone. Caesar had long been gone. Even Caesarion was in danger. Octavianus was coming, and Cleopatra knew they would take her as a captive to Rome. As part of the victory, chained, humiliated, she would be paraded through the streets. She would be mocked by the Romans. A queen, Egypt's last queen, a showpiece. No, she would never allow this. She would prefer death, an honorable death, on her own terms. And here we have arrived, at that famous day, at that famous moment, at Cleopatra's death. August of the year 30 BC, perhaps the 10th, perhaps the 12th. We don't know the exact date, but on that day, Cleopatra was in her tomb, or, according to some sources, in a private room of her palace. With her were two loyal servants, Eris and Charmian. These women had served Cleopatra for years. They had shared everything with her. And now, in her final moments, they were with her too. Octavianus's men came. They were about to break down the door. Cleopatra knew her time was up. What did she do? Here, history becomes blurred. There are different versions. The most famous version, the poisonous snake, the asp. Cleopatra had this snake brought, hidden in a fruit basket, or, according to some sources, in a fig basket, and she took out the snake and made it bite her arm or her chest. The snake bit. The poison slowly spread through her veins. Cleopatra lay down on her throne. She wore her most beautiful dresses. She put on her crown. She would die like a queen. Her servants, Iris and Charmian, did the same thing. The snake bit them too, or each used their own snake. and all three together, slowly, silently, died. When Octavianus's men broke down the door, Cleopatra was dead, lying on her throne as if she was sleeping. Charmian, while taking her last breaths, was adjusting Cleopatra's crown. A soldier shouted, "Is this fitting for a queen?" And Charmian spoke her last words, "Yes, very fitting for one descended from so many kings," and she died. This story, this dramatic, tragic story, has been told for centuries. Plutarch told it, Cassius Dio told it, Shakespeare wrote a play, movies were made, but is it true? Did it really happen like this? Or is this just a legend? Modern historians and scientists have doubts, because the venom of the asp is not that quickly lethal. It can take hours, and it is very painful. It causes convulsions, cramps. Cleopatra dying peacefully, looking beautiful, is not very likely. Moreover, even Plutarch says no one knows what really happened. So what happened? There are other theories. Perhaps Cleopatra drank poison, an elixir, a mixture of opium, hemlock, and other poisonous plants. This is much more logical, fast, painless. Cleopatra was an expert on poisons. She had studied poisons for years. She had conducted experiments on prisoners. She was looking for the most effective, most painless poison, perhaps for her own death. And when that day came, she was ready. She drank the poison, lay down on her bed, and waited for death. Calm, peaceful, like a queen. But there is another theory, darker, more sinister. Perhaps Cleopatra did not commit suicide. Perhaps she was murdered. Yes, you heard right. Murdered! By whom? Octavianus. Why? Because Cleopatra was trying to negotiate to stay alive. With Octavianus, she was ready to give her own life in exchange for her son, Caesarion's life. But Octavianus had other plans. He wanted to take Cleopatra to Rome for a spectacle. But Cleopatra was refusing. She was resisting. And Octavianus understood that. Cleopatra would never come willingly. So what should he do? Would he take her by force? This could damage his image, or kill Cleopatra and make it look like suicide. This was much better. Cleopatra had already been defeated. She took her own life. Tragic, but honorable. And Octavianus innocent. This theory is supported by some historians because Octavianus benefited greatly from Cleopatra's death. Egypt was now completely Roman. He also killed Caesarion. He said, "2 Caesars are too many," and had the young boy executed. Cleopatra's other children were taken to Rome. They were raised by Octavianus's sister, Octavia, and they never became a threat. So what is the truth? The asp snake, poison, murder? We don't know. Perhaps we will never know. Even Cleopatra's tomb has not been found yet. Well, yes, you heard right. The tomb of one of history's most famous women is lost. She was buried with Antonius. Plutarch writes this, a magnificent tomb somewhere in Alexandria. But where? For centuries, archaeologists have been searching. They are digging everywhere in Alexandria. They are even looking under the sea, because part of Alexandria remained underwater over the centuries, earthquakes, tsunamis. A large part of the city sank. Perhaps Cleopatra's tomb is also there, in the depths of the sea, among corals and fish, or perhaps underground, waiting to be found. Every year, new theories emerge. It must be here, it must be there, but no one has found it yet. In 2020, an archaeologist, Dr. Kathleen Martinez, claimed it might be under the temple of Taposiris Magna, 50 kilometers west of Alexandria. She has been excavating there for years. She found tunnels, she found statues, she found coins, but she hasn't found Cleopatra yet. but she is hopeful. She says we are very close. Perhaps one day, Cleopatra's tomb will be found, and then perhaps the secret of her death will also be solved. Perhaps her mummy will be examined. Perhaps traces of poison will be found, or a snake bite, or evidence of murder. Who knows, but for now, Cleopatra remains as a legend, powerful, intelligent, beautiful, the woman who enchanted two Roman generals, who tried to bring two great empires together, who failed but never gave up. Egypt's last queen, the last person to bear the title of pharaoh. After her, Egypt became a Roman province. It lost its independence. A civilization thousands of years old, pyramids, pharaohs, gods, all of them faded in Rome's shadow. And Cleopatra, she was the last light, the last candle that went out. But what a candle, bright, powerful, unforgettable. Today, more than 2,000 years have passed. But we still talk about Cleopatra. We still remember her. We tell stories. We make movies. We write books. Why? Because she wasn't just a queen. She was a symbol of female power, a symbol of intelligence, a symbol of survival instinct, a symbol of tragic love, and a symbol of mysterious death. Perhaps this is Cleopatra's greatest victory. Even in her death, she still lives in our minds, in our imagination. Every generation rediscovers her, reinterprets her. Shakespeare's Cleopatra was romantic and passionate. Hollywood's Cleopatra is ostentatious and seductive. Modern historians' Cleopatra is a political genius and strategist, which is real, perhaps all of them, perhaps none of them. Perhaps Cleopatra was what we wanted to see, something different for each of us. And her death, too, remains as a mystery. Perhaps that's why it's so fascinating, because we don't know the answer. It sets our imagination free. The asp snake, very dramatic, very theatrical, befitting a queen. Poison, more practical, more intelligent. Befitting Cleopatra. Murder, darker, more sinister. Befitting politics. Whichever it is, the result is the same. Cleopatra died at 39 years old, young, very young, but she had lived so much, seen so much, accomplished so much, and we, 2,000 years later, still talk about her, still tell her story, still try to solve her secrets. Isn't this immortality? She may have died physically, but her spirit, her story, her legacy lives on. In every book, in every movie, in every conversation, Cleopatra is still here, with us, tonight, with you. And now, we have come to the end of this long journey. I have told you Cleopatra's story from beginning to end, from her birth to her death, from her victories to her defeats, from her loves to her losses, and most importantly, from that mysterious death. We may never learn what really happened, but perhaps that's better. Perhaps mysteries should not be solved, because when they are solved, they lose their magic. And Cleopatra's story must be magical, must be legendary, must defy time. I hope tonight I have offered you a beautiful journey through the streets of ancient Egypt, in the palaces of Alexandria, in the waters of the Nile River, and in the final moments of a queen. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let the mists of history envelop you. Imagine Cleopatra sitting on her throne, her eyes looking into the distance, thinking about the past, wondering about the future. Good night, sweet dreams. And remember, history does not only live in the past, it lives within us, in every story, in every memory, in every dream. Sleep well.